Hello everyone, good evening and welcome to this edition of Startup Central. I'm Avanne Dubash. This is the show that's focused on entrepreneurship, innovation, technology and all things startup. If you'd like to send in your feedback or have any questions, email us on suc@etnow.tv or on my Twitter handle. Lots lined up today. Let's kickstart the show then with the Startup Fatafat headlines. Hello everyone and welcome to this very special episode of Startup Central. I'm Avanne Dubash. After giving up a lucrative job opportunity, she started her own business and now is the queen when it comes to all things sugar. I'm talking about the co-founder as well as the CEO of Sugar Cosmetics, Venita Singh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're right here in your store, which is an Infinity Mall in Andheri. I'm confused. There's two lovely lipsticks. Toast Roast or Teak Mystique? What's your preference?
I think you're looking more of a toast roast right now.
Okay, so I'm going to be trying...
Very toasty.
Very toasty. Okay, going to be asking you lots of questions,
Sure.
not just about lipstick preferences, but lots more. And I think a lot of people don't know, Venita, that you started off way back in 2014-15 and there were two failed business ideas before Sugar Cosmetics happened. What was that like?
Yes, it was hard. I actually started up right out of college back in 2007 and my very first business plan didn't even go off the ground. And after that, I started bootstrapped another business which didn't work. And then in 2012, we launched an e-commerce company called Fab Bag, which later pivoted to sugar. But having failed thrice before sugar happened, I think it makes me feel very grateful for how far sugar has come, because there were moments where I questioned whether I was born to be an entrepreneur or not. And I'd given up an investment banking job offer to start up. And the stakes were very high. So there were phases when there was a lot of self-doubt, and entrepreneurship is hard. It's a long, hard journey. It's not easy for anybody, even though sometimes media makes it look like it's all about getting lots
so easy.
All the stories about billions of dollars coming in and funding and growth. It makes it seem easy, but for most of us, it's several decades long ordeal. But it's, I think if you love what you're doing, then I don't think there can be a more fun career. So I'm glad I made that choice.
Yeah, for sure. Look where you are today, multi-million-dollar business. But we'll get into the nitty-gritties of it. But it was a very saturated market as well at one point. But and it was dominated by a lot of MNCs. So how did Sugar really pivot to focus on the Indian woman?
So if you look at the beauty market and the way it has evolved, about 10 years back, there was a prescriptive definition of beauty, which didn't account for the fact that India, if you look at the skin tones, is one of the most diverse countries. I mean, you move from north to south, you have a whole range of skin tones, undertones. But the definition of beauty was always like a certain, shade of fair and lovely. And of course, we were like all beauty brands brought really perfect skin celebrities on television to tell us how we were supposed to look. But the young Indian woman didn't want to be prescribed a specific definition of beauty. She wanted to own her skin tone, including the ones that were the deepest and darkest. She wanted to define her own language of beauty. And we realized that while there were a lot of brands in India, both multinational and Indians, they weren't really evolving with the evolution of the young Indian woman. Now, what that meant was that these women were stepping out of their homes, which meant, they were working women or they were going to college. So they wanted products that would work for them all day long and not just for a 2-hour wedding. So we needed to create products that were extremely long lasting, but also made for Indian skin type, Indian weather conditions, the pollution that we have here. And of course, skin tones like mine would rarely find a product that wouldn't attempt to make us fairer. And so we decided to create products that were great for all skin tones.
Let's talk numbers now as well, because there's been a phenomenal growth rate that we've seen year on year. But in terms of operating revenues, I think you missed that target of about 300 crores for FY22. Are you on track, and what's the game plan to achieve it?
So our FY23 target that we had set out for ourselves, so we've achieved that. We grew 90%. FY23.
No, but the number was?
We have about 450 crores in net revenue, and we managed to improve our EBITDA numbers. So we actually improved our EBITDA percentage by about minus 15%.
So what's it at currently?
So numbers are, of course, this is FY23 ended like 7 days back. So numbers are, of course, not out yet, and finally the audited financials will be out in the next 5 to 6 months. We'll definitely send those across to you, but the EBITDA percentage has come down to about minus 15%. So that's
So even your path to profitability, that's something that you guys have been working on. So what's the trajectory in terms of...
FY24 is our goal to be profitable. Honestly, in the last 2-3 years, there was an opportunity to gain market share like none other, because during COVID, a lot of large brands started losing market share and losing shelf space. And for us, if we did not capitalize on those months by improving our distribution footprint and growing feet on street, we would have missed out on a massive opportunity to build market share. And now we are the third largest color cosmetics brand in India. And there are only 2 brands that are ahead of us, and both owned by large international multinational companies. So this opportunity has, for us, made us invest more in both distribution as well as marketing. For the first time over the last 2 years, we tried ATL, which is, being on television. We got Ranveer Singh on board and Tamanna, and we did a massive television campaign. Which has helped us. Like, if you look at our core audience now, 65% of women are actually know about sugar. And I think for a young brand to achieve that in a small period of time, you have to invest in growth. And I'm happy about the fact that we've come this far, and of course it is important for all businesses to be profitable, to be sustainable. So FY24, our goal is to break even, and while still continuing to grow about 70%. So, I mean, the idea is still to ensure that we are the fastest growing brand in the color cosmetics category, but do that profitably, and that's the challenge that the team has taken for itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how much of the total expenses is on advertising and sales promotion, and how has that grown? Because there has been that 3x jump, I think, we've seen in the last year.
So, it's generally a percentage, and advertising, promotion, including performance marketing, digital content, because like I said, makeup is a category which still Indian women feel a bit conscious about wearing makeup, whether they're looking okay. And that's why the entire content, which is that how do I improve the young Indian woman's relationship with makeup, because it can be seen as a tool to make you confident, or it can be seen as something that makes you feel conscious, right? So which is why education is important. So for us, one of our biggest spends is actually content, which is, on Instagram, we are the largest consumer brand with 2.6 million followers. On YouTube, we have 1.2 million followers. And that's something where we're continuing to double down. So I think that overall, it would be about 40% of our net revenue is what we invest in advertising, including the content and influencer marketing and digital, as well as performance marketing. This as a percentage, as we keep growing, will continue to come down. Because the more you spend on ATL, the more you can reduce your the percentage of performance marketing. So,
got it. And I have to ask, what's your IPO plan? I know you've been saying it's going to be about 3 years, but is there any sort of a definitive goal you want to reach before that, or timeline that you have in mind?
So we do expect that next couple of years we should be quite close to filing a DRHP. The idea is, of course, FY24 we should be profitable, and we should accomplish this 70% growth target that we have in our mind, which would also help us become the second largest brand in this category, in the color cosmetics category. We feel that going into that IPO stage where you have a shot at becoming the largest brand in the category, still the fastest growing profitably, with good fundamentals, is I think the perfect timing. And of course the market does now value profitability a lot, so which we want to ensure that we get it out of the way over the next 12 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's move right on and talk about the penetration in terms of how many standalone stores you currently have and where you're present via other stores as well. What's the retail presence?
Sure. So we have stores like these of our own, are about 180. And they're great places for us to bring influencers, bring the community, our customers in to learn. And they're basically, if you look at our entire store, it's an extension of what you see on Instagram. We try to ensure that it is all consistent, because this is for us as much about brand building as Instagram is. Apart from that, of course, we're present in about 50,000 doors, out of which about 2,500 doors have our own makeup artists there. So those are high throughput doors where you do typically about a couple of lakhs in sales per month, where it's better to have your own makeup artist doing the education along with the, of course, process of selling the products. But sugar products are overall available in about 50,000 doors. And the good thing is that a lot of this is now tier 2, tier 3 cities. So almost 50% of our business actually now comes from tier 2 and tier 3 cities, where the consumer is beginning to become as aspirational. So in these cities, we have some of these stores where we're becoming like the first brand that went to that city and started a makeup store. And I feel that women in smaller cities are as aspirational. They're spending as much time on social media. It's just that they still don't have access to the best products in the world.
Yeah, and you have makeup artists there. Maybe I should have got my makeup done over here as well.
Next time please give us the opportunity.
100%. But you were talking about that tier 2 and 3 penetration, nearly 50% of the business. Is that what you plan to really leverage and grow, looking at those tier 2 and 3 cities vis-a-vis the metros?
So tier 2, tier 3 will, of course, because that's where a bulk of India resides. For us, metros also continues to grow, and we do feel that probably by the end of next year, we'll be at more like a 60-40 split between tier 2, tier 3 and metros and tier 1 cities. The good thing about the internet is that e-commerce lets you deliver to 90,000 pin codes. So I don't think that in terms of strategy for an omni-channel brand like us, you don't really need to carve out a separate strategy, because wherever in 19,000 pin codes, you can deliver the next day or the next to next day. So anything that launches at sugar, in the house of sugar, is actually available in a Tinsukia in Assam within a couple of days as well. So I feel that that really democratizes this whole tiering. And we don't need to look at these strategies differently anymore, because it's the same consumer in different parts of the country. Maybe there are some changes in terms of the language, so which is why we have a lot of vernacular content now. Maybe you need local influencers, you need makeup to get localized, the content to get localized. And those are the changes our team is working on. But overall, from a product strategy perspective, I think we look at all of the tiers as the same.
Okay. And just looking at the inflationary pressures as well, one can't deny that you felt it. Has there been any increase in prices on SKUs? How have you dealt with the inflationary concerns?
So for us, because this is a category which operates at a 70% gross margin, we don't really pass through the inflationary pressure to the consumer. But as a brand, over the last 6-7 years, we didn't revise our prices. So there are some SKUs where we've revised the prices over the last 12 months. But in majority, 80% of our SKUs, we've absorbed the entire impact of inflation and not passed it to the consumer. I feel that for us, there isn't as much impact of this pressure on our supply chain from a costing perspective.
Yeah.
But of course, what I'm wary about is that finally inflation impacts demand.
Yeah.
And if, the demand, which has been like, the last 3 months have been fabulous for us. Jan, Feb, March, were our biggest month in terms of tertiary sales, in terms of net revenue. All metrics have been out of the park. On a year-on-year level, we were at double the revenue of last year. So all those indications are good. But of course, April, May, June for us is the beginning of what we call off-season.
Okay.
And that's why we have our fingers crossed. And I feel my biggest fear is that if some of this inflationary pressure results in demand slowing down, then that is impact that young, fast-growing brand can't afford.
Okay. So what's the projection for your revenue, given that you said that there's been that phenomenal year-on-year growth? What's the projection for the next year, the year ahead?
So we're projecting about 70% growth in the coming year, and the year after that would be more around 50 to 60%. We still feel that we have a lot of market share to gain. The market itself
What's your
also.
current market share?
Our current market share is about 6%.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you were talking about as well, leveraging technology, being very digitally prevalent. I understand that you can now use AI to check out how a color of lipstick will look. So how are you leveraging technology?
Yeah. So definitely, like you said, AR, which is allows you to figure out how makeup will look on you before you buy, is one of those important rollouts for us. Apart from that, I think one of the big things that we are seeing is that because we have access, thanks to the fact that in 2,500 stores we have our own makeup artist who has an app where every day she's recording every transaction with every consumer. This allows us a read of the consumer far better than any other brand. So at one level, our own app and our own stores, which is our direct to consumer business, D2C as you call it, makes out about 30% of our revenue. At the other end, even outside in shops, we have our own makeup artists punching in data of what the consumer is shopping. This allows us for about 70-80% of our transactions, real-time knowledge of what is being sold in which pin code to what kind of a consumer.
Okay.
And that, I think, helps us in terms of new product development, in terms of merchandising, in terms of inventory optimization. It helps us with data which a lot of traditional brands don't have access to as on date. Okay. And I feel that the biggest work that is happening in terms of AI at Sugar is really using this data to make decisions on what is getting launched, what is getting rolled out in which city, what is showing up in the catalog in which store, how the trend is going to change for, the wedding season versus Karwa Chauth versus Durga Puja. All of that is, insight is coming from this data that we're sitting on and that we're continuing to analyze. And I think AI is doing earlier, it was all on Excel sheets that you were figuring out merchandising in store, but AI is making it much easier to do this in a more scientific way.
Yeah. And what's the average spend per consumer, if y'all would have an idea, in metros versus the tier 2?
So I'll tell you offline versus online because that's a very stark difference. Yeah. So if you look at a store like this, the average spend per consumer would be in the 2,000 to 2,500 rupee range, which is our own stores. Whereas online, it's in the 1,000 to 1,500 rupee range. So I think there is a, when a consumer walks into a store, there's that much more commitment than making a transaction online, and which is why you see almost a 2x in terms of the average transaction. But yes, if you talk about the average price point at which a product is purchased in a metro, it's probably for us in the 700 rupee range. Whereas in a tier 2, tier 3 city, it will be closer to a 500 rupee range. So there is that difference in some difference, still about 40% that we see in the average sales price of a product in metro versus tier 2, tier 3. But I see that bridging as well. I feel that, tier 2, tier 3, they're really evolving very fast.
Yeah. What's the cash on books right now? If you can share.
I think, we just raised 6 months back.
Yeah.
So I will just say cash on books is not a
Okay.
problem for us to
Okay.
be worrying about.
Yes. And speaking of raising, there was a Series D round that was concluded, $50 million. What has been the total fundraise, that journey, and what are you utilizing funds toward?
So total fundraise in the history of the company would be something around the $90 million mark.
Okay.
And for us, fundraise goes into two things. So one is, of course, the investments in expansion. So when you talk about the capital investment into stores like these, building distribution, technology. So all of that is one bucket. The other is, of course, working capital. So in the early stages of a business, it's hard to, get traditional working capital lines from banks because, generally banks, at least traditionally, didn't, bank on startups.
Yeah.
But that's changing fast now. So we have like 3 banks which are working very closely with us. So we do intend to use equity capital a lot more conservatively in the years to come. And only for expansion, and we do intend to develop a system where all our working capital is going to come from the debt lines, but only equity capital will only be used for growth. And that's the aspiration so far, and our team is on it. So I feel that future fundraising opportunities should be fewer, and that I think is a good thing because if we have the IPO in the 2 to 3 year time frame, then probably we'll just, if at all, have a round between now and the IPO.
And you're well on your way to become in that coveted status of a unicorn.
I think that's gone from being the most aspirational to the most taboo word in the last 12 months. So I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Are you on track?
So I mean, really valuation milestones are, it just depends on where the market is. So it's not even something that the team gets excited. The team gets excited about revenue and profitability milestones,
but not that tag.
Market share milestones. But I don't think there will be a celebration around the unicorn milestone. It'll happen when it happens.
Okay. And speaking of valuations, I know you can't comment on individual companies, but we've seen a lot of listed players. There was a lot of fanfare when they first debuted on the stock markets, and then we've seen the journeys. What's your view on some of the recent listed new age tech codes?
So there is this joke that stock markets end up being like a voting machine in the short term, right? And I feel that sometimes like when you list a company, of course you're accountable to every single shareholder out there, but sometimes like as shareholders also, there is a bit of patience that is needed because business building is a multi-decade long exercise. So I truly believe that as long as there is an investment as a shareholder that I make in a public listed company, as long as the fundamentals are good, the company is gaining market share, the company is improving its metrics on top line, bottom line, the company is well run, they have a good management team. I feel that you shouldn't worry too much about the stock price going up and down because it just wildly fluctuates based on things which are outside of your control.
But some would say it's a bit of a reality check as well, what you could get away with in the private market.
I agree.
Now
so I agree. So what happened in 2021 was definitely inflation on valuations in the private and the public markets based on a lot of euphoria, but primarily a lot of international USD flowing into India, which was a temporary phenomenon and wasn't going to happen again. So I feel that, Indian startups, yes, absolutely. Indian startups and public market benefited a lot from that sugar rush, but I think it was clear to everybody that that's not going to be sustainable.
And you're an example and a role model for a lot of young girls and women who want to become business leaders or entrepreneurs. You've been saying that, when you go to the garden, sometimes young kids will come up to you and say, I want to be an entrepreneur. But it's a man's world predominantly, and you have managed to carve a niche for yourself. How hard or easy has that been for you?
So, yes, if you look at the numbers in business, while about 20-25% of the Indian startup entrepreneurial ecosystem, which includes like, you know, the small mom and pop companies, not just startups, then 20-25% is probably run by women, including solo entrepreneurs, right, which is a bulk of it. But if you look at capital, less than 2% of it is still going to women-led companies. So there is massive disparity. One is at the, you know, founding stage, like fewer women are starting businesses, but even 10x more disparity at the fundraising stage where they have no access to capital. And I feel that, you know, in India's, you know, aspiration of becoming a $5 trillion economy, this one factor, number of, you know, women-led companies, number of women workforce, is going to play a very important role. There is data. McKinsey had a study that said that unless, you know, the women participation workforce in India moves by 10%, we're writing off $700 billion of GDP. So I feel that these are important conversations to be had.
Any book or podcast that you've just heard that you really lean on or that you depend on?
Yeah. You know, my favorite book of all time is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. But two podcasts that I love, one is First Principles by the Ken, and the other is Business Breakdowns that talks about going deep into business metrics. I was just hearing the business breakdown of Titan. And it's an international podcast, but you know, they spoke about Titan's metrics being some of the best in the world on things like ROC, profit, cash flow. And I think it was, you know, lots of stuff to learn,
Okay, I'm going to add that to my list. Do you have a mentor, someone that you look up to?
I have a lot of mentors. Most of it is, of course, you know, people on the board. They've been very important part of the journey in terms of making those strategic choices. Apart from that, I have a couple of other mentors like Vivek Gambhir, who's the CEO of Boat. All the other sharks on my Shark Tank panel are also people I call up whenever I'm in the middle of some tough decision. I think mentors are super important, and I have a bunch of them, luckily.
Okay, great. Good for you. Is there any regret that you have when it came to your career or personal or professional choices?
I don't think regrets, because, you know, at every point, I think I made the best decision, followed my heart. So I'm happy about that. So generally not somebody to have too many regrets. But yes, I think, you know, if one thing from my own story that I would advise entrepreneurs is, don't be in a rush to raise funding. I think sometimes when the markets are good, it's easy to get access to capital. But diluting your own company before product market fit, I think is an absolute no-no. And we did that. Kaushik and I raised capital for this business before Sugar was born. And that I feel is, you know, in the long run, not in the best interest of the founders. So my advice, and, you know, one regret, if I can call it that, would be to not raise before product market fit.
What's your favorite makeup product? One thing that you really can't do without, or top three?
Oh, top three. Definitely mascara. I'm wearing the Sugar mascara, and I feel it just opens up your eyes and like, so that's amazing. Of course, lipstick. I feel for women, lipsticks are like these little swords that give you so much confidence and happiness and power throughout the day. So definitely, I'm a lipstick person. Third would be, you know, concealers, because when you're very stressed, you need to hide all the dark circles and all the stress. So I think the third go-to product for me would be a concealer.
Okay, advice to the next gen, just one quick thing.
Be ambitious, be proudly ambitious, don't try to hide your ambition.
And on that note, we're completely out of time on this edition of the show. Thanks so much for watching.